Hello, my name is Matt Estrade, and I am here to present this topic of launching dementia caregiver support groups, how to offer fellowship, education, and a voice to your families. I'm presenting this to two audiences, the APP to APP virtual lecture series, as well as the viewers of MyCatholicDoctor.com. This is something that you can do in your practice. This is something you can do in your community, depending on what setting you practice in, at your hospital, at your faith-based organizations. And I think you're going to get a lot of practical information here and hopefully some things that you're going to take action on. At the end of the presentation, I will share my contact information, so if you have any questions about anything that we talked about in here, feel free to email me and I will get back with you on those questions. So because we need more support groups in the world. Hopefully you already know that, but if not, hopefully by the end of this presentation you'll be convinced and persuaded of the need and the benefits of support groups, and have some confidence that you can do it wherever you are. My name is Matt Estrade. I'm a gerontologist. I'm based in the greater New Orleans area in Louisiana, and feel very privileged to be here with you to talk about this important topic. So let's go ahead and get started. So first section, we'll talk about basics and considerations for your support group. So the perspective of this presentation is only mine, so take it as that, and however you want to apply these things and think about it, this is kind of where I'm coming from. So I've been working on support groups, facilitating support groups for almost 8 years. I started it that long ago with the local council on aging here in our parish or county, and so it's been quite the journey over that time. I've met so many people, and I've learned so much from support groups, more than I possibly could from the books and from studying. Just that lived experience of caregivers is something that that has really helped me in my practice in working with other support group other caregivers and with their individual needs. I have hosted both in person. Most of those years, actually all those years, have been in person. But when COVID hit for those 2 years or so, some of the groups switched to the Zoom platform. We kept those going. And thank goodness those were we feel like those were a lifeline to our support group participants. I've done it both in a volunteer capacity, and I've also done it in a sponsored. So for volunteer, I've done it at my local church. That's a monthly group that I lead. And the sponsored one has been the caregiver, the Council on Aging in St. Tammany that I mentioned about that I've done for almost these 8 years on a weekly basis. So if you count them up, it's a lot of support groups. And I would say there've been mostly encouraging times, but there's also been disappointing times, especially when starting the support group. It was very slow to get off the ground. It was a challenge to get participants to know about it first, and then after they know about it, for them to actually take the step to start attending them. So they're different phases. First, people need to be aware of them. Second, they need to feel like it's something that they're going to benefit, and then they actually have to go. And there's probably steps in between there. But just because we offer support groups, any of us out here that end up offering them, doesn't mean that people are going to flock to you, although it could happen. But I mention all this just so you're not discouraged if you start this, if you're really excited and it doesn't take off right away. But there are times, like I said, when it does happen, and hopefully with these tips, you will be that learning curve and that awareness curve will be a lot shorter for you and for your group. So why support groups? Before we go through all of this, let's make sure that we're persuaded about support groups, and I think we need to do that before we actually think about offering them, because it's going to be some work to do that, to build them, to sustain them, to keep them going, and even start other ones, hopefully. So first of all, I would say it's the fellowship and the shared experience, being in the room um, with other caregivers. And as you know, everybody's situation is different, but everyone's is the same, also. So group and even if you don't realize that the caregivers in the room are going to find the common themes, they're going to find the things that they have in common, and they're going to create these these friendships, these networks that really just it's really a grace and it's a blessing to see. Education. So these are opportunities to share education, things that you've learned in clinic, things that you have learned from other caregivers, things that you've learned from the research literature. So, and we'll talk more about education, where to get those sources, and how to offer those things. There's at least my suggestions on how to offer that. I should note right here that support you can have just a support group where everybody is sharing things and have no education, no. Of course, you're still learning, but it's not that you're presenting education. Then you can have other groups that are strictly education, where you're doing a presentation the whole time, and maybe there's some questions and answers, question and answering time. And then there can also, of course, be a blend to some degree, where you're having where the main focus of the group perhaps is that people are able to share their experiences, ask questions, but you're also putting in there small pieces of education, and it's one of the things that I find that works the best. That blend that leans towards sharing information and asking questions, but also bite-sized pieces of education that we'll get to later in this presentation. Wisdom. Support groups offer an opportunity for caregivers to offer the things that they've learned, the tips and the tricks and the things they've learned the hard way, things that they've read about on the outside. And it's an opportunity for them to receive that wisdom as well. So, and I would and I anytime someone joins a group for the first time, so new participant comes in, immediately they have, without fail, and I've seen this I've seen I say this for all the people who have joined my groups. They're able to immediately offer some kind of wisdom. We didn't ask them to prepare anything, of course, and they're new, but just from their experience, they're able to add some things from their lived experience as caregivers. So, and in that way, it can be really special for them to immediately be able to contribute to the group, and where they thought that maybe they wouldn't be able to do that. Sharing local resources. So this is great because people talk about adult day centers in the area. They talk about different facilities. They talk about physicians and other providers, home care, sitter companies, etc. So all these different resources that otherwise they would not know about. Other caregivers would know about, and even myself as a facilitator, I learn about so many resources just from those who are living that experience. And then finally, and of course this list is not exhaustive, the last benefit that I'll talk about is that this really is self-care. In our support groups, we talk a lot about take care of yourself, take time to get away from the caregiving environment. Take time to go out with your friends. Take time, go to the gym and work out, and it's important for us to realize as facilitators, but also for they to realize that just them being here in that Zoom room as a support group or in person, that this is self-care, and that's something that they should have confidence about and really be proud of themselves for taking the time, because not every caregiver does. I would say most caregivers don't avail themselves to support groups. So them being there is a victory in itself. It's a step towards self-care that we hope that they will then perpetuate and kind of take that example that they've set and go to exercise and go to other classes and go out to lunch with their friends, etc. So it's something to build on, and something for them to be proud of. So who is the audience? So we talk about caregivers, right? So, but that's a really broad term. So, and this is about dementia caregivers. But you can also You can also open it up to family members. So, of a family, not everyone is providing care. There might be some that are even avoiding care. So, in your marketing, sometimes you can consider you're going to call it a caregiver support group or you're going to call it a dementia family support group. And I've just started calling one of my groups a family one to make it more broad and inclusive, and for people to feel like if they're not a caregiver or they don't feel that they are a caregiver, that they're still welcome to attend. So I think it's just a matter of preference, but I wanted to mention that idea. So you can have just dementia caregiver support groups. You can also have specific niche groups of caregivers. But remember, your pool of potential candidates coming to that is going to be smaller. So an example of a niche group might be spousal caregivers for dementia, or another might be adult children of of parents, and then you might even have one that can be young adults that are taking care of a parent or a grandparent, and you can kind of just you can go on and on. You can have a male only caregiver support group because some of the studies have shown that men are reluctant to share certain things. They might feel better if they're with other men. So we can go on and on. There are so many different niches that we can go down into. It's a good idea to start just very broadly, and then once you find people are coming in, you can possibly, if your group is very successful, gets large, you can probably niche down after that and just see what the group wants to do. Some might want to peel off and be in a men's only group. Some may want to may be in the your general group, but also want to meet as adult children of parent adult children taking care of a parent also. So there you have two support groups, and that's if it gets gets big enough. So way down the road, we're just focused on starting our first one, which can be broadly caregiver support groups. Also, further down the road, you can think about a group for those who have mild cognitive impairment. So here we're of course not talking about the caregiver, but we're talking about the person who's received that diagnosis or sees those symptoms, and it's a place where they can feel safe and they can share things. Now this can be along with their caregiver, or it can be without, just kind of depending on how your group is, the people who sort of initially join, how they want to sort of create things and how you can get people to join. So some things to think about. After the MCI group, you can think about an early stage group. That would probably want to be with their caregiver, but it just depends, because maybe they're driving, maybe they're no longer driving. And then the last one I'll talk about, which is one that I've started online months ago. I've been going for about 3 or 4 months, as an after loss, or I guess you could call it a bereavement group for those who are caring for someone with dementia, living with dementia, but they've passed away. Because what they've explained to me, and what I really appreciate, is that the dementia caregiving journey is different than taking care of a loved one with other diseases. There's so many small losses along the way. There's still a lot of emotions and thoughts to unpack when the person living with dementia has passed away. So a caregiver approached me and said, "Hey, I'm trying these bereavement groups, but they're not really working out. They don't really get what I just, finished going through over the last several years." So that is something to think about as well. So when do you offer a support group? So this is there is no right answer. It's sort of what works for you or for the facilitator. What works for those who are going to be attending. Like, how do you attract as many as possible? You have to consider that some caregivers are still working, some are retired and have more flexibility. You have some where they have to rely on they would either rely on a professional to come in and sit with their loved one, or another family member to come in and sit with their loved one while they come to your in-person group, or even sometimes so that they are free of distractions if you're hosting an online group. So here are some options, of course. So there are monthly groups as far as we're talking about the frequency, bi-weekly or weekly. The sponsor group that I do is weekly. Uh, the volunteer one that I do is monthly, and the sweet spot might be bi-weekly. I feel like a month is a long time, but sometimes weekly is too frequent. So it really just depends on, and you'll just sort of have to pick one, I'd say, based on yours or the facilitator schedule, and kind of see how it builds over time. Is it going to be after clinic hours? Is it going to be after 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, something like that? Is it going to be the early evening? Is it going to be the early morning? Are you looking at potentially having these on Saturdays? So it just really depends, and that's something you can brainstorm with your team. You can brainstorm with other caregivers in your clinic. You can poll them. You can ask them, hey, if I offered a support group, what times would work for you? Just that you're kind of getting a pulse on everybody. But remember that you need to think about, as a clinician, you need to think about balancing your family life, your free time, etc., so that you don't burn out. So this is a great thing that you're looking to do in starting a support group, but you have to consider the practice and everything else that you're doing. Where do you host the group? So here on the screen are several options. Of course, you can use Zoom. There are also other virtual platforms. Speaking of Zoom, if you have you can set up a free account as at the date of this recording, November of 2022. You can have a free Zoom account and have 40 minutes for free. If you want any longer than that, you either have to, at the end of those 40 minutes, you start back up, and that's kind of it's kind of strange to have to do. It's clunky. It's not convenient for the caregivers. You can also get you can pay a subscription, like a professional subscription, and have an actual paid account, which I have, and those can go on for however long that you need them. And then you might find other uses for having that professional or that paid subscription. So you got virtual, but if we're talking about in the in-person realm, perhaps you have a clinic conference room. Perhaps you can use the waiting room if it's after hours or on a Saturday. You can always talk to organizations in the community, such as churches. They might have many churches have a lot of meeting space. Now booking it is another whole thing, but they do have space typically, and that's an option. They may already have a support group, and it might just be a matter of still having your support group, but finding a time when theirs is not meeting. Let's see, Red Cross, the YMCA, American Legion. So there's lots of places that will probably let you use that at no charge. You could potentially use the private room of a restaurant. One where it's kind of off to the side. They may have private dining. So if you're picking an off time when they're not trying to actually rent and have some private dinners there, that's always a possibility. And it may work out also for that restaurant, because people will probably they might be buying coffee, snacks, muffins. You might even consider sometimes having a meal every once in a while, if that works out for the group. And then there are senior care communities. They typically have activity rooms, conference rooms, small, at least small rooms. That may be another place to have them. And it also has that sense of community and being with older adults, even though not everyone with dementia is going to be older. Most of them are. The idea of a senior care community, it might fit in well and attract more caregivers, but also it could have the opposite effect, and people may not want to think about that next step in their future. So it really just I wouldn't worry too much about people being or wanting to avoid that, but it was just a thought that just a thought to consider. The facilitator. So there are many options for being the facilitator. First of all, it could be you as the clinician, but you also, like I mentioned before, you want a balance of work and free time and what you're doing, depending on if this is after hours, of course. If this is during the day, then having dedicating an hour and a half. What does that do to your practice? Are you able to do that? Is that even more stressful to have it during the day, even though you're not having to do it in the evening? So that's something to think about. I will say, as a clinician, you are going to learn so much by spending time with the caregivers in your group. You're going to be building relationships with them, long-term relationships with them and others. As a result of that, you'll build trust. So there are many, many, many pros to you doing that as a clinician. Social workers, this seems to work hand in hand with the type of work that they do. Most social workers are very experienced at leading groups, understanding people. So if you have a social worker in your group, or if you want to sponsor a social worker coming in after hours or even during the day, that's a possibility. Current or former caregivers, they can make great support. They can make great support group facilitators. Um, former caregivers, I would think, have more time as opposed to a current, but that's not always the case. They wouldn't want to. You can ask that question and just see how a current caregiver would respond. Depends on if they're still working or not. So, most, like I said, most are probably going to be former caregivers. Um, it could be right after their loved one passes away. It could be someone in the group that, after their loved one passes away, they start to take on a co-facilitator role, and see where that goes, or just whatever they feel like they're getting called to would be something to be open to. You can potentially talk to service organizations. They may have trained facilitators, and so one that I'm thinking of is the Alzheimer's Association. Um, they have trained facilitators, speakers bureau perhaps. At least in our community, they actually train support group facilitators. So that is something to think about as well, getting the training there, but also understanding what the commitment is afterwards. It's been my experience that if you get trained by them, you were potentially branded as an Alzheimer's Association support group, which can be a good thing. But also, they may ask for data. They may ask for names and rosters and stuff like that. Some clinics will be comfortable with doing that. Some caregivers will be okay with you sharing the information. Others won't. So, but that's a way that you can partner with the Alzheimer's Association or other local Alzheimer's and dementia groups in your area, because we have some in our area that are not affiliated with the Alzheimer's Association, but they still do great work. They're still a nonprofit. You can think about graduate students in gerontology and psychology, social work, nursing, etc. Something that is especially, I think, works well is having a student that has a flexible schedule, that maybe they're not having to work if they're looking for volunteer hours. Some schools may ask them to have volunteer hours. So if they came once a month, and even if it wasn't every single support group, then that's a possibility of having them come for that and then gain service hours. And then a service provider, so a clinic. I'm sorry, here I'm talking about hospices. So there was a time in our area where there was a monthly support group that was at a senior care community, and the local hospices, where we have like 4 or 5 or maybe more, they would sort of rotate in somebody each month. So there are pros and cons to that, having a different person each time. It's harder to build relationships, but it is something that in the realm of possibility, something to consider if you're trying to work with others who want to start a support group. All right, so let's get to recruiting participants. So outreach, there are many different ways to provide outreach, and as someone who does not subscribe to a newspaper or on a regular basis read a physical paper newspaper, I have to say that there are so many people that come to my support groups because they learned about it in the newspaper, like the actual physical copy, particularly in the community events area of the paper, or even sometimes there will the organizations that sponsor me will get a some kind of free ad because they're a nonprofit, or some kind of inexpensive ad. So that's something to really consider. Newspapers are still relevant, especially your local community ones, and especially if they're free. You can think about utilizing the EMR, or electronic medical records, using the patient portal, sending messages to patient families that way. So that's a way to access them if the caregivers are active. However, sometimes they might consider it spam if they've not asked for that type of information. So you have to sort of balance that. But EMR is a possibility. You can try letters in the mail, just running a report of patients, and then of the caregivers. And if you do that, do you address that to the family of? Do you address it to the patient? So that is something to think about. I've not done that myself, so this is just really just a result of brainstorming. So so think about privacy. Think about all the different things around sending letters in the mail from a provider, and just whatever you discern there with your team, with legal, etc. So we'll leave that right there. There's the local aging professionals network. Now, sometimes there are professional networks within communities, and I'm thinking of like monthly, like here locally, we have a group of like hospice representatives, and assisted living and memory care representatives, and nonprofits, and those who have residence homes, and just aging professionals, trainers, dementia trainers, consultants. So they'll get together, they'll share resources, they'll share ideas, and so this might be a place. It's been my experience that people want to hear about any of the support groups in the area, so then they can offer it to their clients, so they can kind of spread the word. That helps them build goodwill. That helps them to gain credibility as somebody in the community who cares about the citizens. So think about those networking groups. Chamber of Commerce is another one. Think about advertising and promoting in churches or faith-based communities. I've found that the real estate in the bulletins, so the space in the bulletins is sort of at a premium, because they can get lengthy, and the church itself wants them to read their stuff. But it's definitely worth asking if you can have some kind of mention in there, or you can even purchase ads. Many churches offer spots on the back or throughout where you can purchase an ad that talks about it. So, and that just depends if you want to put money into it based on what kind of return besides goodwill that you see coming from it. It could get you some patients in the door where otherwise they wouldn't have seen it. So that's a possibility. So all that to say, faith-based organizations are a possibility. Social workers and discharge planners. It's my understanding that a lot of the people who are aging professionals, they network and they call on social workers and discharge planners. So I'm thinking of the hospices and assisted livings. Those groups, they are gonna try to be a resource to the discharge planner. So this is in that same way, I think it makes it a good referral source for your support group, to let them know about that. And also there are also organizations of local social workers perhaps, and just even in kind of in word of mouth in their networking group. That's possible. I know that in our state of Louisiana, we have a Facebook group of social workers. Even though I'm not a social worker, I belong to that group, and I'll put things out such as educational sessions that I'm having, and also the support group. So it's a good place to tell people about it. Other clinicians in town. So if there are clinicians that you are, maybe not officially partners with, but you have good relationship, and you tell others about their services. If you don't provide a particular service, they may be open to promoting your support group. They may not have any interest in starting a support group, but you know what? They believe in the idea, and they're going to send people to yours because they trust you. So that's something to consider. And then think about community bulletin boards. Many coffee shops, they have bulletin boards where people put actual business cards. They put flyers. Maybe you can make not a full page one, because that's going to, depending on the size of it, and you don't want it getting taken down. But that's something to think about, and also to tell the shop owner about your group, so it's not just a random group on there. Who knows what people stick on their bulletin boards? They might go through it every once in a while and kind of clean it out. Just introduce yourself, let them know that you have the support group, and is it okay if I put this on there? And that would go a long way, I think, to it staying up for a long time. And then check on it occasionally to see if it needs to be replaced, if it starts getting worn or anything like that. You can even put, many times when people are selling something and they put it on a bulletin board, they have perforated the bottom 16th, let's say, of the page with the phone number, so people can tear it off and they have the phone number and the name. That's something to think about. But then you're looking at having probably a larger flyer to accommodate that. But you can also use QR codes, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. All right, so the flyer. Let's talk about the flyer. So your flyer wants to have all the essential information, as you know: who, what, when, where, how. So the dates, the times, who the group is for. Sometimes it's appropriate. You may choose to put, we're not able to have those living with dementia attend. Some people already figure that. Some people are not wanting to bring their loved one with dementia, but some people. So you can either put that on there, or you can just let them ask that question of you. It's never been an issue for me personally in these 8 years. But that's something, if you think is relevant, you can put that on there. Put what the group does. We're an education group, or we share things, and we have education. However you wanna like sort of position your group, and of course your contact information. There is a way to collect email addresses if you are even, I wouldn't even say tech savvy, but just interested in how technology can help you and how others respond to technology. You can create a QR code and put this on your support group. And right here on the slide is an example of a QR code. So at any point you can pause this video. You can take out your smartphone, go to your camera, and then hover over as if you're going to take a picture of the screen, and then you'll see some you'll see that some yellow lines or yellow corners around the QR code. Press the QR code that you're looking at on your camera, and it will send you on your phone to a place where you can put your email address. Now, I'm not asking you to put your email address, because I actually use this QR code to collect email addresses for my Council on Aging group, but it's just to show you as an example. So they will be added to a database that I don't even need to look at. So when I send my MailChimp reminders out, which is all but automated, it's very easy to do. So next time I send that out as a reminder, it will go to that person that just added themselves. And every once in a while, I see how many people have added themselves to the support group. using that QR code. So the neat thing about MailChimp is that they do it themselves. So they initiate it. They're also going to get a confirmation email like saying, "Do you want to join this group?" And so there's that one extra step of opting in to make sure they want to be in that mailing group. And also at any time they can go and unsubscribe, and you don't even need to know about it. You don't have to you don't have to remove them. They remove themselves if they want to stop receiving those. So the MailChimp is probably something that many people will have questions about. So again, at the end of the presentation, I'll have my information, and you can always reach out about collaborating on that. All right, so we have the group, we've promoted the group, we've got participants, and then this next section is going to talk about facilitation. So these are 3 recommended ground rules to try to keep things focused, to try to keep things safe, for people to want to show up and feel like they can form bonds with people. The first one, and I think these are going to make sense if you've been part of any group where you're discussing sensitive things. These are gonna sound familiar, especially the first one. What is said here stays here. So I don't ever say I can guarantee that, but I let them know that we ask that so everybody feels comfortable sharing that anything that we learn here in this room in this session, including who is attending, that it remain confidential. That includes if you go out to the grocery store and you're with somebody, another friend or family member, and you go see somebody, it's so appropriate to introduce the person that you met through the support group, but you don't need to say where you met them from. Some people might be sensitive and not want others to know that they're taking care of someone with dementia. So it's just better to be safe in that aspect. So yeah, what is said here stays here. And see, the next one is everyone has the right to be heard. So that lets everybody know just that everyone has a right to be heard if they want to speak. But also, if you have someone, and invariably you'll have somebody that wants to monopolize the group. Doesn't happen that often, but at some point in your career it will happen. This speaks to that as well. If someone is speaking and monopolizing the group, not everyone is able to talk. So that's why we remind everybody has a right to be heard. But speaking of the person who monopolizes, I found that most people, they self-regulate, they take care of it. Some people actually think they're talking too much and they're not. Like, we want them to really kind of get into their story, especially if it's their first time. When somebody comes their first time, they usually have a lot to kind of get off their chest. They also have a lot of context and background and want to tell people about what they're what's going on. And then the last one is we will only give advice if it's asked for. And I've only recently started using this in the past 12 months, and I learned it from another support group that was a more education, but also support group, and a scripted one. And I really like this one because some people come and they just want to listen, or they just want to get things off their chest. They're not really open to advice. We might assume, it's a safe assumption that people are there for advice, but we can't always guarantee that. So I like to I don't harp on this at all, because it can also have an effect where people don't want to offer advice. But every once in a while, say, hey, do you want us to brainstorm around that, or do you want any thoughts from the group? Do you want to open that question or that challenge up to the group? So however you want to put it, these are some natural ways to possibly say that. One more thing about the first point about confidentiality, even though who says what is confidential, I also emphasize that what we do want you to take out of the group and out into the world, your community, your family, are the lessons that you've learned and the wisdom that you gather. So that certainly is not confidential, and we want y'all to go out and help others with the wisdom, with the referrals, with the knowledge that you're gaining from the group. Education types and sources. So towards the beginning of the presentation, I talked about how you can have an all education group, or you can have an all support group where it's sharing and it's Q&A and people just kind of like bouncing around in a good way, sharing their thoughts and their wisdom. And what I like to do is, so my support groups are all 90 minutes, and well, most of them are 90 minutes, and I try to sprinkle in different parts of different pieces of educational along the way, because I find that especially if you have a small group, or they're not warmed up and they're not doing a lot of talking, they're still kind of building the trust, that you need things to sort of inject into the group for them to find value in it. So I like to come in with some education. If I get to it, sometimes it's not a big deal. Sometimes it is important for me because I feel like it's something that's, I think it's going to be really helpful. So before we talk about how to offer that education, let's talk about some of the types and sources. So we have peer-reviewed journal articles, of course, but also at the same time, while you and I might enjoy reading a peer-reviewed journal article, we do need to boil it down into layman's terms and be able to present the high points to the group. And then the amount of information that we share also, we want to be careful about that to see so it's not taking up the whole time. Popular articles that you have vetted. So there are a lot of science themed news outlets that will find the peer-reviewed article, and then they will write, they'll find the journal article, and then they'll break it down in layman's terms, and then they'll promote it, and they'll have advertisers around that. So it's it's almost like a newspaper. They want people to read those articles. So you just need to be careful. Whenever I find a popular article that I like, that they've kind of broken down something where it's easy to understand and it's entertaining at the same time, it's there are examples and illustrations. I like to find go back to Google Scholar if you don't have access through your institution, but go find that article and at least read the abstract and make sure that it's matching what you learned in that popular science article. So you can look at reports from the AARP, from the Alzheimer's Association. So every once in a while, based on different topics, the AARP will have surveys and reports they put out, different trends in aging in place, in dementia. The Alzheimer's Association, every single year they have an annual report booklet, and it's, gosh, I can't remember if it's somewhere between 50 and 100 pages, but they'll have statistics that are updated from the previous year, some things that you see every year, so you see some trends, and usually they have a special write-up that focuses on, it might focus on, one that I remember from 2 years ago was they interviewed primary care physicians. They polled them about dementia diagnoses. They talked about education. So they kind of got the perspective of primary care, which is really important. Another year, their focus was on minority outreach, minority impact of dementia on minorities. So they'll take like a special topic and have that towards the end. So highly recommend looking at that report every year, and it usually comes out in the January, February time period. Videos from trusted sources, and by trusted sources, NIH is usually very helpful. Then you have private organizations like Teepa Snow at teepasnow.com. She has many videos on her YouTube page, on her YouTube channel. Of course, hers or anybody else's, you want to look at it so you're not looking at it the first time with your group, obviously, so you can actually lead some discussion. You can have some previous thoughts about it as well. So but Teepa is an occupational therapist, and person who is known internationally for her training methods, her different programs or platforms, and I certainly recommend Teepa Snow, and have gone through training with her and her team, certified in some of her in training and consulting and things like that. So I think she's got great information, and there are other great consultants out there as well. Just make sure that you're comfortable with it, that you agree what is in that particular video, so that you can help unpack it and do some other things we'll talk about in the next slide. And then lastly, the National Institutes on Aging, which is part of NIH. They actually, I do some educational videos on Facebook Lives on Facebook, and many times I will get my topics from an article that they've written, and they might have over 100 articles that are on different aspects of aging, including dementia, and I will usually go to that and start with that as sort of my base and my source, and it gives me an opportunity for a variety in aging topics. It also helps me to explore outside of dementia, even though I focus mostly on dementia. I do help people with just and do education on aging in general. So this helps me kind of keep some variety as well and keep up with the research. All right, so how can we incorporate this education into our group? So here are 3 options, and this is not exhaustive. So you can do other ideas that are not here. Of course, you can blend these together. So one thing you can do is create a whole presentation. You can find that article, you can find that video, and you can spend 20 to 30 to 60 minutes on something and then have Q&A. Although I think an hour is long. Lectures are not something that caregivers are usually looking for, but depending on the topic, you could send information to the group ahead of time. If you have an email list, you can send it to them and say, hey, if we have enough time, we're going to talk about this particular article, or watch this or talk about this video. If you have a chance before, take a look at it, but make it clear that they don't have to do that. That's just one more thing that they have to try to schedule. But sending it to them and making it optional is good. But also let them know if you're going to actually look at it in the session as well, live. And then the third option that I'll talk about is introducing snippets over time. It can be that you found this great video or article and you sort of break it up over several sessions. And if you do that, you can break it up and have a few videos in that 90 minutes or that hour, however long that you're going to be meeting. So what I like to do, and this is actually these are principles of adult learning that I learned from Teepa Snow's her training sessions and certifications. The basic method is you show something like a 2 to 5 minute video, so that's like an experience, right? And then you go to the group and you say, hey, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think about that? And then so these are discussion questions to guide them through. So it's not just we're going to entertain you with this video. It's what are your thoughts on it? What's your reaction on it? How does this relate to your current situation, if at all? Like sometimes it's not, but for most of the time, for most of the people, it probably will. At least those are the videos you're going to look for. And then the last one is really the whole purpose is not entertainment, it's for people to take action. So how can they apply this knowledge going forward to the group? And you can ask them for specific answers. And some people are going to want to be real specific, and some are going to be like, I don't know, I like this, but I really have to think about it. I really have to think about how I'm going to apply it, or if I'm going to. So using these things, you've gone through an adult learning cycle where you've said, hey, here's some information. What is your opinion on it? How does this relate to you? And how are you going to use this information starting tonight or starting tomorrow? And then later, in future sessions, you can follow up and say, hey, remember we watched this video. Who took a chance? Who put this into action? Who put this into practice? And what was the result? So not everyone's going to be doing it. Not everyone's going to do it. But if you have one or two, even just one, that person and their effort and potentially their results is going to inspire people, and so that if you keep using this pattern, it's going to help people in the future. Some facilitation tips. So what I like to do at every support group not before we start, but as we start, people coming in the room, either physically or virtually, I like to get a pulse check of the group using all thumbs. So, and it may feel awkward at first, but I encourage you to try it out a few times over a few sessions, and just you can laugh about it if you want to. So I say, how's everybody doing? Please show me how you're doing by a show of thumbs. Are you here, or here today? And this is something else I got from Teepa Snow. They do that, and it lets people immediately share kind of where they are. It's not taking much time at all. Everybody can do it at the same time. Everybody visually can see, sort of how people are individually, and also how's the room. Where my mind usually goes for right or wrong is how many are in a good mood, how many are here. So like what's a consensus if there is one around the group. It also tells me, hey, if there's somebody down here, we want to make sure that if they're ready to talk, we want to go to them. Once we open it up to the whole group, we want to make sure that we give them the opportunity to go first, so they can have more time to unpack if it's a crisis that's going on. So here, or here. I like to start with brief introductions. Not every time. Certainly in the beginning as you're starting the group, and whenever someone is new, or if it's been a while since someone's come to your group, it might be 6 months and this person's back, we're gonna do introductions. And the cool thing is, I think people appreciate introductions. They appreciate the reminders, and it gives everybody a chance to speak. Even if they're just giving an introduction, they're having a chance to voice themselves. So this will be the second time in 5 minutes that they've gotten to provide input and not be just talked to. So because we've got the thumbs, and then we got the brief introduction. And that is the introduction is typically, and you'll want to explain this at first, and you'll want to model it. And that's your first name of the care recipient, their basic diagnosis, and sometimes, and I don't even really like to use diagnosis, but kind of like what's going on, basic condition, something like that. And some people will say, oh, well, they've been diagnosed, or they haven't, but they're forgetting things. But what you're looking for is brief. And it's even good to mention, like, we're gonna, that was really brief with everybody, us going around the room for those introductions. It was really brief, but we're gonna have the rest of this hour, or the rest of this hour and a half, to unpack and hear from everybody, and we'll just kind of like pop around for those who want to speak. You can offer a tip or a piece of education. It is not the focus. We just a moment ago we talked a lot about education, so there are different models and ways you can introduce that. So you can offer some education. What I like to do in my notes, I like to discreetly track who has spoken already, because sometimes I'm just so focused on the conversation that it's possible I could forget that someone didn't get to speak yet, because it's such a good conversation, and we don't ever want to do that. We don't want to get to the end of our hour, or at the end of our 90-minute session, and realize, oh wait, so-and-so didn't get to offer an update, and maybe they did and maybe they didn't, but just making sure everybody has the opportunity. And of course you can do that whether you're online or you're in person, but I encourage you some way track who has spoken. If someone is quiet, welcome them to speak if they want to, but also give them the option to just listen. Also, they might just be there taking everything in, not wanting to share yet what's going on with them, and it may not be till next week. But sometimes that is I mean, that is certainly everybody's right. Their right is to be heard, but also to just listen as well. Humor. Uh, I don't tend to use humor, but I think humor is really important. Well, let me back up. I don't use it as a facilitator. If I do, it's very spontaneous, and I make sure that I do my best to make sure it's appropriate. It's always based off of something that we're talking about in the group. Now, without fail, every one of the hundreds of support groups that I'm facilitating, there's laughter at some point, and it's spontaneous, and it's typically from a caregiver talking about a situation, and just everybody just joining in, laughing at many times at just how ridiculous the situation was, or how ridiculous the situation is that you just have to laugh. So that's just an FYI. You don't try to build. I don't try to build in humor because I feel like it might backfire. But the spontaneity is something that adds, some lightness and some real joy to the group. So just be open to that, and don't feel bad if there's laughter in the group. There actually should be, but it comes in a very natural way. And then offer to stay around after. Sometimes it's not that often. Sometimes someone wants to talk afterwards, about something that happened in the group, or maybe something that didn't happen in the group. So it sounds bad, that something happened in the group, but it is good because it gives an opportunity for somebody to do that if they need to. But like I said, it's pretty rare, and that's something you can do virtually or in the in-person group. Trying to get my slide going. All right, some more facilitation tips. It's important to allow venting, but there comes a point where venting becomes, a whole session about it, which you don't want to get close to that. So the whole group, and this is something you can let everybody know about. So, we want to be solution focused. We want to help you. We want everybody to get things off their chests, but we don't want to stop there. If they want advice, we want to help them brainstorm. We want to share some wisdom from our experience, etc. So think about that. Venting is good, but we want to pivot after that to solutions. You don't have to have the answers if they do want advice. Something as a facilitator that I like to use is this phrase, however you want to use it, is has anyone else experienced that before? And just be quiet, and then people will talk. It's important to respond to the emotion that the person has, and we've already talked about not giving advice unless they're open to it. But even if they are open to advice, it's important to first respond to that emotion, and then sort of, if they want to, you can unpack that. But wow, this is really this is really hard on you, isn't it? And sometimes that sounds so obvious that it's silly, but however you want to say it in the moment, you really just kind of have to speak from your heart at that moment. Connect your heart with theirs and what you recognize. And sometimes it's the facilitator's not even the first one to do that. I have some very caring individuals in my groups, and they will do it before I do sometimes. So that's a huge blessing. But be prepared for that, to not just come in and save the day. It's to recognize, the hurt that they might have, the frustration that they might have, etc. So, and you're going to sort of build this vocabulary over time as well, of things that, of sort of labeling these emotions and everything that you're going to recognize. It's important sometimes, you don't have to do this every time, but it's important to recognize strengths of those who are in the group. Their confidence, their ability to look ahead, their optimism, their finding joy even in the most stressful moment. So there are, of course, very succinct ways to say some of the things. These actually like qualities or characteristics or character traits that you can even find online. Lists of positive character traits. These are things that these are really a gift when they're sincere. They are a real gift to somebody in helping them, because many people, they come in, another benefit of the support group I just thought of is that they come in and they might be doing a great job, but they don't know that because no one's told them that they're doing a great job. But coming to a support group, they receive well-deserved praise, they receive recognition, and they get some confidence that, okay, yeah, it was, that was a good decision for me to do that. It's okay to have moments of silence where no one is speaking. And just like if you're giving a presentation, you feel like a very brief pause, maybe a second or so, might feel like an eternity to you. Sometimes a break in the discussion is really good because it lets people kind of like sit in that and to ponder and to think. So don't feel like someone always has to be talking all of the time. It can sometimes silence, a brief silence, can be really good. But you do want to be ready with a question if need be. So that's the bullet right before that. Have some discussion questions ready to inject in there. A question I like to inject is, what is something that you learned this week? What is something that you learned about yourself that you've learned about yourself on this caregiving journey that perhaps you never thought about? Or what was something that you were reminded about yourself, a positive quality that you've always known or people have told you, but you do this, you exemplify this as a caregiver. What is something that you've been grateful for? So these are all like discussion questions that are practical, but also tie into the emotion and also kind of bring about some positive things. So just know that you'll always be learning and improving as a caregiver, support group facilitator, or someone who is actually just, maybe you're not facilitating, but you are helping to make it happen. Just know that you'll always be learning. You'll be learning about the marketing. You'll be learning how to respond to people, how to connect with them. You'll be learning about what times are appropriate. And like I said in the beginning, there are going to be encouraging times. There are going to be times when things are very slow, and you might be disappointed about the attendance. And my advice is to keep it going, because the concept of a support group, why to have a support group, is so special. It's so sound. It's in the research literature. People are going to find you. People, if you're providing an environment where people can share things, where they're going to learn things, where they're going to feel support, people are going to find you, and it's just a matter of time. So I encourage you to do that, and appreciate you being here for this presentation, to hear about these tips and everything that I've learned about on my journey, and some of these from the literature, and all of it from the caregivers who are my teacher and who are your teacher as well. At the end of the day, that's how we really have to look at this. We're facilitating this process for them, and we're really blessed to be in their presence and to have this opportunity to serve them and to learn from them. And it's going to, I think we've come to, I know, if we come to it with that humility, it's going to be very successful, and it's going to be rewarding for us professionally and personally. So how do you keep in touch with folks? Get their permission. Most people are fine with email. Some people might want text messages. That's really up to you. I typically don't send text message reminders. There are programs for you to do that, but that's just remember, that's going to be more time investment. But it also might be something that people appreciate. Those last minute reminders. Some people, many caregivers, I'd say, they get so busy sometimes they look at their watch and they've missed the support group. They wanted to go, they got so busy doing something, but they couldn't go because so it's just however you want to do that. But there are programs to do that. With MailChimp, you can use if you build it, if you design it correctly, you can just send the same support group email every time, and it only takes a few clicks to do that. Remember, if you've talked about any articles or websites and things that you told the group that you were going to send, make sure that you follow up with the group and that you send them. So that's another reason to have that notebook there. You're keeping track of who's gotten to speak already, but also you're writing down websites and things that you're going to come back and send to everybody. And encourage the participants to exchange information. This is your professional call to do that. What I've done in the past is send an email out to everybody, and with blind carbon copy. I don't share anybody's email addresses. That's why I put BCC up in this top bullet. I don't share any email addresses. I say, here's the group. Respond back to me if you want to share your email with the group, and then people will send. You'll get some people who send it, and then you send a separate email that has those participants who have volunteered to share there. So in order to get the email addresses, you have to share your email addresses. So to the extent you want to encourage that and offer that, it could certainly be an opportunity for them to reach each other in between the groups, especially if it's monthly, or just to follow up if they have a certain similar situation. They might want to get together for coffee. So and then how special is that? Your group, the group, has connected two individuals, and they're able to sort of continue and support each other even outside your monthly group or bi-weekly group. So thank you for watching. Here is my contact information, my email address. I blog and have videos and do lots of stuff at CatholicAging.com, and then that's that other link is my profile. So while you're watching this in a video and you can't click on any of these links in the screen, you can certainly see my email address, the website, and then you can at least search for me at MyCatholicDoctor if you wanted to see my profile there. So thanks again. It's been a privilege to present to all of you, and I hope to hear from you, either questions, comments, requests for consults, or just any other things you want to do to explore this to help you to create these in your community, because they will make a difference. They will be rewarding to you. They will be rewarding to your practice and to you personally. Thanks again for being here.